The massive space station floated in the darkness between stars like a metal city. It was the heart of the Galactic Concord, home to over 200 alien species who had joined together thousands of years ago. Today, for the first time in history, humans have been invited to visit. Captain Daniel Shaw stood at the front of his small team as their shuttle docked with the station. He was a tall man with gray eyes and a calm face that rarely showed his true feelings. Behind him stood Lieutenant Amy Pearson, his science officer, a woman with sharp intelligence and red hair she kept tied back. Next to her was Kyle Bennett, their communications expert, a young man who was always nervous but brilliant with languages and codes. Dr. Nathan Cole, the ship's doctor, completed their group. He was older than the others, with kind eyes and steady hands. The airlock doors opened with a hiss, and they stepped into a world unlike anything they had ever seen. The docking bay was enormous. Ships of every shape and size filled the space, from tiny personal vessels to massive warships. Aliens of all kinds moved through the crowds. Some walked on two legs, like humans. Others floated, crawled, or moved in ways that made no sense to human eyes. The air smelled strange, a mix of chemicals and perfumes from 100 different worlds. A group of tall aliens approached them. These were the Zorvani, the most powerful species in the Concord. They stood over 3 meters tall, with bodies covered in thick scales that shimmered like oil on water. Each one had 4 muscular arms and eyes that glowed with a soft golden light. They moved with the confidence of creatures who had never known defeat. The leader of the group stopped in front of Daniel. His scales were darker than the others, almost black, and he wore elaborate robes decorated with symbols of authority. "I am Ambassador Vector," he said. His voice was deep and rumbling, like thunder in the distance. "Welcome to the Concord, humans." Daniel bowed his head respectfully. "Thank you, Ambassador. We are honored to be here. I am Captain Daniel Shaw, and these are my officers." Vector looked at each of them slowly. His glowing eyes moved up and down their bodies, examining them like a farmer might examine livestock at a market. When he finished, he made a sound that might have been a laugh. "These are the humans?" he said to the other Zorvani. "They are so small, so thin. Look at their arms, so weak. And their skin so soft. A child could tear them apart." The other Zorvani laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Amy stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "We may not be as physically strong as your species, Ambassador, but we have other qualities that—" "Qualities?" Vector interrupted. "The Concord values strength, power, the ability to crush your enemies and protect your allies. What can creatures like you possibly offer?" Daniel put a hand on Amy's shoulder, gently holding her back. "We came here hoping to establish peaceful relations," he said calmly. "We have technologies we could share, knowledge that might be valuable." Vector waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. "We have studied your broadcasts for decades. Your technology is primitive. Your knowledge is limited. You have nothing we need." He turned and began walking away, clearly expecting the humans to follow. "Come, you will be shown to your quarters. Tomorrow, you will appear before the High Council to hear your place in the Concord." As they followed the Zorvani through the winding corridors of the station, Kyle moved close to Daniel and whispered, "This isn't what we expected, sir. They're treating us like animals." "I know," Daniel replied quietly. "But we need to stay calm and learn as much as we can. There's more going on here than we understand." That night, in the small rooms they had been given, the team gathered to discuss their situation. The quarters were cramped and uncomfortable, clearly designed for a species considered unimportant. Kyle had spent the afternoon accessing the station's public databases. What he had found was not good. "The Concord works on a ranking system," he explained, showing them the information on his datapad. Species are placed in order based on their combat ability. The strongest are at the top, with full rights and representation. The weakest are at the bottom, with almost no rights at all. And where are we in this ranking? Amy asked. Kyle hesitated. There isn't a rank low enough for us. Based on the physical tests they ran when we arrived, they've classified humans as barely above the species they use for food. Nathan shook his head sadly. So they didn't invite us here out of friendship. They invited us to become their servants. Or their slaves, Kyle added grimly. Daniel stood by the small window, staring out at the endless stars. His face was calm, but inside his mind was working furiously. Can we leave? He asked. Not easily, Amy replied. When we entered Concord space, we became subject to their laws. If we try to leave without permission, they could consider it an act of rebellion. They might attack Earth. The room fell silent. The weight of their situation pressed down on all of them. There must be another way, Nathan said. Some kind of appeal process, something in their laws that could help us? Amy pulled up another file from the database. There is one thing. It's called the Trial of Champions. It's an ancient tradition, older than the Concord itself. Any species can challenge their ranking through single combat. Single combat? Kyle asked. You mean a fight? Yes, one representative from each species fights. The winner's species rises in the ranking. The loser's species... She paused. The loser's species becomes the property of the winner. Property? Nathan's face went pale. You mean slavery? Complete and total. Every man, woman, and child. Daniel turned from the window. His eyes had changed. There was something new in them, something hard and determined. Who would we have to fight? To gain any real status, we would need to challenge one of the top species. The Zorvani and their champion? Amy brought up an image on the datapad. It showed a massive Zorvani warrior, even larger than the others they had seen. His scales were dark red, covered in scars from countless battles. He carried a weapon that seemed to be made of pure energy, crackling with deadly power. His name is Krathner. They call him the Extinction Blade. He's been champion for over 200 years. He has never lost. He has killed the champions of 17 species. Kyle stared at the image in horror. This is suicide. We need to find another way. But Daniel was not listening. He was looking at the image of Krathner, studying every detail. His grandfather had taught him something important when he was young, back on the family farm in Kansas. When you cannot beat someone with strength, you beat them with thinking. Every giant has a weakness. You just have to be smart enough to find it. Get me everything you can about Krathner, Daniel said. How he fights. How he wins. His biology. His psychology. Everything. Captain, what are you planning? Amy asked. Daniel smiled, but there was no humor in it. I'm going to give them exactly what they expect. A weak human. And then I'm going to show them why that's the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. The High Council chamber was the most impressive room Daniel had ever seen. The walls stretched up so high that the ceiling disappeared into darkness. Banners from 200 different civilizations hung from every surface, each one representing a species that had joined the Concord. Light came from floating crystals that drifted slowly through the air like glowing jellyfish. At the center of the chamber was a raised platform made of something that looked like glass but was harder than any metal known to humans. This was where the most important decisions in the galaxy were made. Decisions that affected trillions of lives across thousands of worlds. Daniel walked toward the platform alone. His footsteps echoed in the vast space, making him feel very small. Behind him, in a section reserved for visitors, Amy, Kyle, and Nathan watched with worried faces. Around them sat representatives from dozens of species, all whispering and pointing at the lone human. Ambassador Vector sat in a large chair at the highest point of the platform. His forearms were folded across his chest, and his glowing eyes watched Daniel with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. "You requested to speak before the full council, human," Vector said. His voice boomed through the chamber. "This is very unusual for a species of your low status. What do you want?" Daniel stopped at the center of the platform and bowed respectfully. "Thank you for this opportunity, Ambassador. I have come to invoke the trial of champions." For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the chamber exploded with noise. Some delegates laughed loudly. Others gasped in shock. The Zervani warriors standing guard around the room exchanged amused glances. Vector raised one of his hands, and the noise slowly died down. "Do you understand what you are asking? The trial is a sacred tradition. Once you begin, you cannot stop. There is no turning back." "I understand completely," Daniel replied. "And you understand that you personally must fight as your species champion. No one else can take your place?" Daniel nodded. "I will fight." More laughter filled the chamber. Vector leaned forward in his chair, his scales catching the light from the floating crystals. "Captain Shaw, I will admit that your courage is impressive. It is foolish beyond belief, but impressive." "Very well." The Zervani accepted your challenge. He pressed a button on his chair. "Bring in Krathner." The great doors at the far end of the chamber swung open. The crowd fell silent immediately. Krathner was even more terrifying in person than he had been in the images Amy had shown them. He was enormous, standing over 3 meters tall, with arms as thick as tree trunks. His scales were dark crimson, the color of dry blood, and they were covered with scars from hundreds of battles. He wore ceremonial armor that displayed 17 symbols, one for each species whose champion he had killed. He walked slowly toward the platform, each step making the floor vibrate. The weapon at his side hummed with deadly energy. When he reached Daniel, he stopped and looked down at the human with cold, hungry eyes. "This is what challenges me?" Krathner said. His voice was like gravel scraping against stone. "This tiny, soft creature?" Daniel had to tilt his head back to meet the champion's gaze. "I am." Krathner walked in a slow circle around Daniel, examining him from every angle. "You are brave. I will give you that. But bravery without strength is just a more colorful way to die." He leaned down until his face was close to Daniel's. His breath was hot and smelled like burning metal. "I will make your death quick, human. That is the only kindness I can offer." "I appreciate that," Daniel said calmly. "But I have a request before we fight." Vector raised what might have been an eyebrow. "The challenged party may set certain conditions." "What do you ask?" "I ask that the trial take place in 3 standard days. I need time to prepare." Krathner laughed, a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the chamber. 3 days? 300 would not be enough to save you. But I will grant your request. Use your time well, human. It will be your last. As the council session ended, Amy rushed to meet Daniel in the corridor outside the chamber. Her face was pale with worry. 3 days? She demanded. "That's all you asked for?" "It's all I need." "Daniel, I have been studying everything I could find about Krathner. His reaction time is 4 times faster than any human's. His strength could crush titanium. His scales can stop energy weapons. I don't see how you can possibly win." Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. "What else did you find?" "Not about his body. About his mind." Amy thought for a moment. "He's arrogant. Every recording of his fights shows him playing with his opponents before he kills them. He likes to make them suffer. He likes to show everyone how powerful he is. What else? He has never faced an opponent he couldn't overpower. Every species that has challenged him tried to match his strength with their own. They all failed. Daniel nodded slowly. And that's exactly what we're not going to do. For the next 2 days, the human team worked constantly without rest. Kyle spent hours watching every recording of Krathner's fights, noting every move, every pattern, every habit. Nathan studied Zorvani biology, looking for any weakness in their bodies. Amy worked with the engineers on their ship, building special equipment that Daniel had designed, and Daniel trained. But not the way anyone expected. He did not lift weights or practice combat techniques. Instead, he sat quietly for hours, breathing slowly, emptying his mind of fear. He studied the arena where the fight would take place, walking every inch of it, touching every wall. He asked questions that seemed strange to the guards who watched him. What was the floor made of? How was the air circulated? Where were the power systems located? The guards laughed at him. They thought he was looking for an escape route because he was afraid. They did not understand what he was really doing. On the morning of the 3rd day, Ambassador Vector came to visit the human quarters. He found Daniel sitting alone on the floor with his eyes closed. "I came to offer you a choice," Vector said. "Surrender now, and I will speak on your behalf. Your people will still serve us, but they will not be treated as harshly as others. You have my word." Daniel opened his eyes. "No, you cannot win this fight. No human can. It is physically impossible. Perhaps not." Daniel stood up and looked directly into the ambassador's glowing eyes. "But I can survive it." Vector shook his head sadly. Survival and victory are not the same thing. In the trial, only 2 things can happen. One fighter lives. One fighter dies. There is no middle ground. Daniel smiled. It was a strange smile, one that Vector could not quite understand. "That's where you're wrong, Ambassador. There is always another way. You just have to be clever enough to find it." Vector stared at the human for a long moment. For the first time since they had met, he felt something he had not felt in centuries. He felt uncertain. There was something in this small, weak creature's eyes that did not belong there. Confidence. Not the false confidence of someone who did not understand danger, but the real confidence of someone who knew something others did not. "What are you?" Vector whispered. Daniel's smile widened. "I'm a human. And today, you're going to learn what that really means." The rescue mission was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. For the first time in recorded history, humans and Zorvani worked side by side, not as masters and servants, not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals, fighting for a common cause. Krathner led a strike team of his best warriors. Amy coordinated the operation from the command center on the human ship. Kyle tracked enemy movements, while Nathan prepared the medical bay for any injuries. Together, they formed a team that combined Zorvani strength with human intelligence. The abandoned mining station floated in the darkness of space like a metal skeleton. It had been empty for decades, left to rot after the mines ran dry. Now it was home to the remnant, filled with soldiers from a dozen conquered species who had united against the Zorvani. "I'm detecting 30 enemy ships," Kyle reported. The station itself has heavy weapons and shields. A direct attack would cost many lives. Krathner studied the tactical display. "In the past, we would simply send overwhelming numbers. We would accept the deaths as necessary." He paused, his 4 hands clenching into fists. "But your captain taught me there's another way." What would he do? Amy thought carefully. He would find their weakness, something they're not expecting. Nathan pulled up detailed scans of the mining station. The station's life support is barely working. It was abandoned because the power core is unstable. If we could make it more unstable, we could force everyone to evacuate. They would have to bring the prisoners outside, Kyle added. We could grab them during the confusion. Krathner nodded slowly. Clever. Very clever. Your captain would approve. The plan worked almost perfectly. A small team of Zervani soldiers created a loud distraction at the main entrance, drawing the attention of the guards. While everyone was focused on the front, human engineers sneaked into the station's maintenance tunnels and caused a chain reaction in the power core. Alarms screamed throughout the station. Lights flickered and died. The walls began to shake as the power core overloaded. The remnant fighters scrambled to evacuate, rushing toward their ships before the whole place exploded. In the chaos, Krathner personally led the rescue team to the detention level. They moved fast, taking advantage of the confusion. Most of the guards had already fled. Those who remained were quickly overwhelmed. They found Daniel and Vector in a makeshift cell at the end of a long corridor. Both were battered and bruised, but alive. A handful of remnant soldiers guarded them, but they surrendered immediately when they saw Krathna and his warriors coming. "You came for us," Vector said as they removed his restraints. His voice was filled with wonder. "Zervani and humans together. We had a common enemy," Krathna replied. "And a common cause?" Daniel rubbed his wrists where the restraints had left marks. He looked tired but unbroken. "How many casualties?" "None, on either side. We captured over 200 remnant fighters without a single death." Vector stared at Krathner in disbelief. "That's impossible. The Zervani way has always been to crush resistance with overwhelming force. The Zervani way has always been wrong." Krathner turned to face the ambassador directly. "We have spent 3,000 years conquering and enslaving. We told ourselves it was for peace, for order. But all we did was create enemies. The remnant exists because of us. Every rebellion, every attack, every death is our fault." He looked at Daniel. "This human showed me that strength is not the only virtue. Wisdom matters. Mercy matters. Working together instead of dominating, that matters too." Over the following months, the Galactic Concord transformed in ways that historians would remember forever. The old system based on military power was dismantled piece by piece. In its place, a new system emerged, one that valued every species for what they could contribute, not just how hard they could fight. Species that had been conquered were given choices. Those who wanted independence received it. Those who wanted to remain part of the Concord stayed as equal members with full rights and representation. The chains that had bound billions of creatures for thousands of years were finally broken. The Zervani themselves changed the most. Their warriors, once feared across the galaxy, became protectors instead of conquerors. They used their strength, not to dominate, but to defend those who could not defend themselves. Krathner led this transformation, traveling from world to world, making amends for centuries of injustice and humanity. The species that everyone had dismissed as weak and worthless became something precious. Teachers, ambassadors, bridges between civilizations that had never trusted each other before. Years later, Daniel Shaw returned to Earth. He had been offered palaces, monuments, and every luxury the galaxy could provide. He refused them all. Instead, he went back to his family's farm in Kansas, where he had grown up learning the lessons that had saved his species. One evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sun set over the wheat fields, a shuttle descended from the clouds. Krathner stepped out, looking somewhat uncomfortable in civilian clothes instead of armor. "I did not expect you to live so simply," the former champion said. "You can have anything you want. The Concord would give you worlds." Daniel smiled and gestured to an empty chair. "This is all I ever wanted. Quiet, peace, time to think." Krathner sat beside him. The chair creaked under his weight, but it held. For a long moment, they watched the colors of the sunset paint the sky. "I came to thank you properly," Krathner finally said. "What you did in that arena did not just defeat me, it freed me. It freed everyone. I didn't do anything special. I just showed you what humans have always known. There's more to life than strength, more to winning than fighting, more to worth than power. And yet, in all our centuries of traveling between the stars, no species ever taught us this. It took a human to show us what we had been missing. Daniel watched the last rays of light fade from the sky. Stars were beginning to appear, scattered across the darkness like diamonds on velvet. Out there, somewhere, trillions of beings were living lives that had been changed forever because of what happened in an arena far away. Maybe that's why we're here, Daniel said quietly. Not to conquer the galaxy or rule empires. Just to remind everyone that the small and the weak have value too. That sometimes the best way to win is to offer mercy instead of death. Krathner was silent for a while. Then he stood and extended one of his massive hands toward Daniel. I was once called the Extinction Blade. 17 species fell to my weapon. I was the most feared warrior in the galaxy. He paused, and his voice softened. Now I am just Krathner, and I am proud to call you my friend. Daniel took his hand. The grip was gentle despite the incredible strength behind it. The feeling is mutual. They stood there as night fell completely. Two beings from opposite ends of the galaxy. One who had been called weak and one who had been called invincible. Now, neither label mattered. What mattered was what they had built together. A galaxy that was learning, slowly but surely, that there was more than one way to be strong out above them. The stars shone bright with possibility. Somewhere out there, other species were discovering their own strengths. Other champions were learning the value of mercy. Other civilizations were finding new ways to cooperate instead of conquer. And it had all started with a single human who refused to fight the way everyone expected. Sometimes, Daniel thought, the greatest victories come not from winning battles, but from changing how battles are fought. Not from defeating enemies, but from turning them into friends. That was humanity's real strength. And it was the most powerful force in the universe. The Arena of Champions was older than any building in the Concord. It had stood for 5,000 years, watching the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Its walls were made of stone that had come from a planet that no longer existed. Its seats could hold 1 million spectators, and on this day, every single seat was filled. The galaxy had come to watch a human die. Daniel walked onto the arena, floor wearing simple clothing. He carried no weapons. He wore no armor. The crowd above him jeered and laughed. Some threw food and garbage at him. Others held up signs with pictures mocking humanity's weakness. The sound was like a thunderstorm, a constant roar of hatred and mockery dot in a special section reserved for important guests. Amy stood next to Ambassador Vector. Her hands were shaking, and her face was white as paper. "He's really going to do this," she whispered. Vector nodded slowly. "He's either the bravest creature I have ever seen, or the most foolish. Perhaps both." An ancient horn sounded, deep and powerful, and the gates on the opposite side of the arena opened. Krathner stepped out into the light, and the crowd went wild with cheering. He was wearing his full battle armor now, gleaming plates of metal that covered every inch of his body. In his hands, he carried the Extinction Blade, a weapon forged from the combined weapons of every champion he had ever killed. It crackled with energy, leaving trails of lightning in the air wherever it moved. Krathner raised the weapon above his head, and the crowd roared even louder. He walked slowly toward Daniel, savoring every moment. "Human," he bellowed, his voice amplified so everyone in the arena could hear. "I gave you 3 days to prepare. I see you have wasted them. No weapon? No armor? Do you wish to die so badly?" Daniel stood perfectly still. His breathing was slow and steady. His eyes never left Krathner. "I'm ready," he said. Krathner charged. The attack was faster than anything human eyes should have been able to follow. The extinction blade swept through the air in a deadly arc that would have cut a normal person in half. But Daniel was not where the blade struck. He had moved just slightly, just a few inches to the side. The weapon passed through empty air. Krathner spun and attacked again. And again. And again. Each strike was perfectly aimed, powered by muscles that could lift mountains. Each strike hit nothing. Daniel was always somewhere else. Never far away, never running or hiding. He simply was not in the place where the blade landed. He moved like water flowing around a rock, like smoke drifting in the wind. The crowd fell silent. This was not possible. This small, weak creature should be dead. Krathner should have killed him with the first strike. But minute after minute passed, and Daniel was still standing. For 5 full minutes, Krathner attacked with everything he had. He used techniques that had killed 17 champions before. He tried tricks and traps that no opponent had ever escaped. Daniel avoided them all. "Stand still!" Krathner roared, frustration creeping into his voice for the first time. "Fight me!" "I am fighting you," Daniel replied calmly. "You just don't recognize it." In the viewing area, Amy was staring at her datapad with wide eyes. His biometrics. Krathner's body readings are changing. Vector looked over her shoulder. "What do you mean?" "His heart rate is going up. His body temperature is rising. He's getting tired." "Impossible. Zorvani can fight for hours without tiring. At their normal pace, yes. But look at how hard he's working. Every attack is using all his strength. He's not used to missing. He's not used to having to try so hard." Down in the arena, Krathner was indeed struggling. Sweat poured from beneath his scales. His breathing came in harsh gasps. His attacks, once precise and deadly, were becoming wild and desperate. Daniel continued to move, always just out of reach. Never attacking, never fighting back. Just surviving. "What are you doing?" Krathner demanded between heavy breaths. "What kind of trick is this?" "I'm showing you what humans do," Daniel replied. His voice was still calm, still steady. "We don't fight your way. We don't need to be stronger or faster. We just need to be smarter." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It was no bigger than a coin, made of metal and plastic. Krathner's eyes widened. "What is that?" "An atmospheric modulator. 3 days ago, I asked to see the arena. Your guards let me walk around, touch the walls, examine everything. They thought I was looking for a way to escape. They didn't bother to watch what I was really doing." Daniel pressed a button on the device. "I planted 27 tiny generators around this arena. They're hidden in the walls, under the floor, everywhere. Right now, they are producing a special kind of energy field." The air around Krathner began to shimmer like heat rising from hot pavement. "Your armor uses power systems to make you stronger and faster. Those power systems are now being disrupted by my energy field. In about 30 seconds, your armor is going to stop working completely. And then you will be carrying 200 kilograms of dead weight." Krathner looked down at his armor in horror. The lights on its surface were flickering and dying. He tried to pull off the plates, but they were sealed. They were designed to protect the wearer from attack, which meant they could not be removed quickly. "You cheated," he gasped. "No, I followed your rules exactly. The Trial of Champions allows any personal weapons or equipment. It says nothing about modifying the arena beforehand. I checked the laws very carefully." The armor went completely dead. Krathner collapsed under its weight, his massive body crashing to the arena floor. He struggled to stand, but 200 kilograms of metal held him down like chains. Daniel walked toward him slowly. The crowd was completely silent now. No one could believe what they were seeing. The greatest champion in the galaxy lay helpless on the ground, defeated by a creature they had called weak. "I could kill you now," Daniel said, stopping beside the fallen warrior. By your own laws, I would be allowed to do it. But humans don't fight your way. He knelt beside Krathna. Their eyes met, and Daniel spoke softly enough that only the champion could. Here, I'm going to offer you something no one has ever offered you before. Mercy. He stood and looked up at the viewing area where the council members sat in stunned silence. The trial rules say that combat ends when one champion surrenders or dies. There is no requirement for death if surrender is offered and accepted. The council members began talking frantically among themselves. This had never happened in 5,000 years of trials. No one had ever shown mercy. It was not done. Ambassador Vector stood slowly. His face was unreadable. The human speaks the truth. The ancient laws do not require death. He looked down at Krathna. Champion, do you yield? The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Krathna lay on the ground, unable to move, staring up at the human who had defeated him without landing a single blow. Finally, in a voice that everyone in the arena could hear, he spoke. I yield. The arena erupted into chaos. The days after the trial were unlike anything the Galactic Concord had seen in 1,000 years. The impossible had happened. A human, a member of a species that everyone considered barely more than animals, had defeated the undefeated champion of the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. And he had done it without ever throwing a single punch. News of the victory spread across the stars faster than light itself. On thousands of worlds, billions of creatures watched recordings of the fight over and over again. They saw the mighty Krathna charging, attacking, failing. They saw the small human moving like a ghost, untouchable, unstoppable. They saw the champion of the Zerveni fall and surrender. Everything had changed. Daniel Shaw sat in a private meeting room on the Concord station, facing Ambassador Vector. The room was different from their first meeting. More comfortable, more respectful. The tiny, cramped quarters they had been given before were now replaced with spacious rooms fit for honored guests. You must understand, Vector said slowly, that what you did has shaken the very foundations of our society. I understand that I followed your rules and won, Daniel replied. Yes, technically, you followed the rules. But in doing so, you exposed a flaw in our thinking that we never knew existed. Vector's four hands clasped together in what looked like nervousness. We built our entire civilization on the idea that strength decides everything. The strong should rule. The weak should serve. This has been our way for 3,000 years. And now? Vector was quiet for a long moment. Now, there are questions. If a weak species can defeat a strong one through cleverness, what does that mean for our hierarchy? What does it mean for the species we conquered and enslaved? What does it mean for everything we believed? Before Daniel could respond, the door opened and a Zervani officer rushed in. His scales were pale with stress. Ambassador, there is an urgent situation. Representatives from the Velith Collective are demanding to speak with the council. They say the trial has made their slavery agreement invalid. Vector's scales darkened with worry. The Velith were conquered 80 years ago. They cannot simply demand freedom. They are using the human victory as an example. They say that if physical strength is not the only measure of worth, then their defeat should be reconsidered. They want a new trial, or they want their independence. The officer left, and Vector turned back to Daniel. Do you see what you have done? One fight, and already our empire begins to crack. Daniel leaned forward in his chair. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Not a bad thing? We have kept peace and order across 1,000 star systems for thousands of years. Without our strength, there would be chaos, war, death. Or maybe there would be freedom, choice, the chance for every species to decide their own future. Vector stood and walked to the window. Outside, ships from 100 different worlds moved through space. Each one represented a culture, a history, a people with dreams and hopes. "You speak like someone who has never had to maintain order," he said quietly. "But words do not hold empires together." "No," Daniel agreed. "But maybe empires are not supposed to last forever. Maybe they're supposed to change." Meanwhile, in another part of the station, Amy Pearson was dealing with her own kind of chaos. Her quarters had been flooded with messages from representatives of dozens of species. Everyone wanted to meet with the humans. Everyone wanted to understand how they had accomplished the impossible. "It's incredible," she told Kyle as they sorted through the messages. "Species that wouldn't even look at us a week ago are now treating us like heroes. Can you blame them?" Kyle replied, "For centuries, the only way to rise in the Concord was to be strong. Anyone who couldn't fight was stuck at the bottom forever. We just proved there's another way." A chime sounded at the door. When Amy opened it, she stepped back in surprise. Krathner stood in the entrance. He wore no armor now, just simple clothing. His massive form filled the doorway, blocking out the light from the corridor. But there was something different about him. His posture was less aggressive. His eyes were softer. "May I enter?" he asked. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Amy and Kyle exchanged looks. "Of course," Amy said carefully. "Please, come in." Krathner moved slowly into the room. Even without his armor, he was enormous. He sat in a chair that was too small for him and looked at his clawed hands. "I came to speak with your captain," he said. "The guards told me he was meeting with Ambassador Vector." "He is. Is there something we can help you with?" Krathner was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with emotion. "I have been a warrior my entire life. From the day I was born, I was trained to fight, to conquer, to dominate. I was told that this was the only way to have honor, the only way to prove my worth." He paused. "Your captain showed me that I was wrong." Kyle leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "I have killed 17 champions. 17 species now serve my people because I defeated their best warriors. I was proud of this. I thought it made me great." Krathner looked up, and his eyes held something Amy had never expected to see in Zervani. Doubt. Shame. Was I wrong? All those deaths, all that suffering, was it for nothing? Before Amy could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red emergency lights flashed. The floor vibrated with distant explosions. Kyle pulled out his datapad. "What's happening?" "There's been an attack on the station. Multiple explosions in the outer sections. Security forces are responding." Krathner was already moving toward the door. "The Remnant. It must be them. The Remnant? A group of conquered species who have resisted Zorvani rule for centuries. They hide in the outer regions of space and strike when they think we are weak. If they believe the Concord is crumbling because of what happened in the arena, they will attack." Amy grabbed her equipment. "We need to find Daniel." They rushed through the station's corridors. Everywhere, people were running and screaming. Smoke filled the air from damaged sections. The sound of weapons fire echoed in the distance. When they reached the meeting room where Daniel and Vector had been talking, they found it empty. A Zervani guard lay unconscious on the floor, a burn mark on his chest. Krathner examined the scene with experienced eyes. "They took them. The Remnant has kidnapped your captain and my ambassador." Amy felt her blood run cold. "Where would they take them?" "They have ships hidden throughout this sector. They will take them somewhere secure, somewhere they can broadcast their demands to the entire galaxy." Kyle was working on his datapad. "I'm tracking their signal. They're heading toward an abandoned mining station on the edge of the system. It's heavily defended." Krathner turned to face Amy. His eyes had changed. The doubt was gone, replaced by something harder, more determined. "I may have lost my fight with your captain," he said, "but I have not lost my skills. I will rescue them, but I cannot do it alone." Amy met his gaze without fear. "Then we'll do it together. Humans and Zorvani, working as one." For the first time since she had met him, Krathner smiled. It was a strange expression on his scarred face, but it was genuine. "Your captain was right about your species," he said. "You are more dangerous than anyone realized."